Hello, and welcome to the Thyroid Pharmacist Healing Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Izabella Wentz, PharmD. I have my dear friend Maja Miller here in the studio with me today. We're going to be doing a bit of a deep dive into minerals, why you need them, why you might be deficient in them, and the best ways to test for it. I'm going to give you a little bit of a background about Maja before we bring her onto the show. So, Maja Miller is a metabolic health coach and functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. A fancy way of saying that she uses clinical labs to analyze blood, urine, stool, hair, and other labs to figure out why her clients feel burned out, exhausted, and sick. She uses those results to create tailored bio-individual protocols to reverse their symptoms. On average, her clients have seen 12 medical doctors before working with her and actually finding relief for their symptoms. As the founder of Maja Miller Wellness, she helps highly productive individuals and ambitious professionals transform their bodies from the inside out through her signature programs like the Inside Out Protocol, Mineral Magic, and the Adrenal Detox. Over the course of her 10 plus year career in wellness, she's worked with over 10,000 clients. Wow. She's been a podcast guest on many shows, including Fertility Confidence, Superwoman Wellness with Dr. Taz, and Thrive. She's also been featured in Forbes, Austin Fit Magazine, and the Austin Business Journal. She lives in Austin, Texas with her husband, son, and two pups, and she also has another baby on the way.
Yay! Liam is on the way July 4th.
Yay, I'm so excited for you and congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming here on the show with us. I always love to ask people, how did you get into this line of work?
I think this is going to be a very common story, which is I was suffering with all sorts of symptoms. I went to the doctor and it was a pill for the anxiety, it was a pill for the IBS, it was a pill for the eczema. And it would have been great if it actually worked, but none of the pills worked. And so I just knew that there had to be a different way to live. That's where I met with my first functional nutritionist when I was living in Santa Monica. I think it was at Santa Monica Wellness or Santa Monica Nutrition. I don't remember. It was so many years ago. And ran labs around micronutrient deficiencies, heavy metal toxicity, those kinds of things that I thought I was perfectly healthy. I ate well. I was a marathoner. I was a triathlete, former Division I athlete. And I just didn't understand why I was having these symptoms, right? I wasn't overweight. And so I just kind of dove into functional nutrition, functional medicine. And once I realized that there was this entire world out there, it really motivated me to quit my full-time job, which is in digital media and technology, and figure out how I can kind of incorporate this into my life. And then eventually I wanted to help other people. It's like you see the light and then you just want to stand on top of a roof and scream like, it doesn't have to be this way. So that's how I fell into it.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. I mean, I was a conventionally trained pharmacist, and once I got the Hashimoto's diagnosis, I was like, great, I can take meds, all will be well. And somewhere along the line, working in pharmaceutical sales, I realized like medications, I love medications, don't get me wrong. Sometimes they can be life-changing, but they were not the only way. In fact, for many people, they were not the way at all. And I got really, really into nutrition. Um, Nutrient deficiencies have been one of the things that I find can be really big needle movers very, very quickly for a lot of people. Now, I primarily work with nutrients like thiamine, B12. Let's see, what else do I work with? Iron a lot, but there's also minerals. Can we talk about minerals, what they are, what they do, and why we might need them and why they're so often overlooked?
Yeah, I think that the conversations that are often had around nutrition are based around macronutrients, so your proteins and your fats and your carbs. And the reality is that different people have different macronutrient needs. Different cultures have different macronutrient needs. You can take a look at the Plains Indians and then also the Inuit, communities, and they eat completely different macronutrient kind of profiles. And yet, if they're eating that kind of ancestral diet, they're all micronutrient sufficient. And so once I realized that, I started getting into like, well, maybe the conversation needs to be around micronutrient deficiency and sufficiency. So your macronutrients are your proteins, fats, and carbs. You need them in higher, kind of larger levels because, and then your micronutrients are, you get them from the same proteins, fats, and carbs that you're eating, but they're kind of like the good stuff in food that just makes your body work. And so when we take a look at your micronutrients, you've got your vitamins, your minerals, your amino acids, and your essential fatty acids. And I think that conversation is significantly more interesting than the macronutrient conversation. I know the conversation on protein is very, very big and kind
Yeah.
of in vogue right now in our communities. And so your minerals, well, some of your vitamins, vitamin D, for example, our body makes that. It's actually a hormone that our body produces. But minerals, your body cannot produce them. You have to get them from your food. And so when we look at close to 90%, or actually it's even more, of the topsoil in the United States is gone. That means that the minerals in our food is gone, right? So we've got sick soil that's growing sick plants that are being fed to animals who are then sick. And then those animals who are not being fed a grass-fed diet, if you're eating conventional meats, then are fed to an ever increasingly sick population. So you've got this, so you're supposed to get these minerals from your food, right? You're either the plants or the animals that you're eating. Traditionally, those plants are being grown in ecosystems that have a lot of topsoil that is mineral rich. You're drinking water that's mineral rich. You're drinking animals or eating animals, excuse me. You're eating animals that are eating grass, which is grown in mineral rich soils. So these minerals your body can't produce, and minerals are like the spark plugs to your body. So imagine going on a road trip. You've got your girlfriend, a cool new car, your snacks, your playlist, and gas. There's air in the tire. You go to turn the car on, and the ignition doesn't flip. Well, it's usually a spark plug issue. You could have the coolest ride and all the stuff for your road trip, but you're not going to get anywhere because the spark plug doesn't work. Minerals are like the spark plugs to your body. Every single metabolic process in your body, hormone production, stomach acid production, energy production, detoxification. I mean, all of these things require minerals as cofactors to work in conjunction with enzymes and those kinds of things. So when we talk about the root cause, right, finding the root cause of somebody's symptoms, do you have low progesterone, or do you not have the right minerals that you need in order to make progesterone? Do you have low testosterone, or do you have not enough minerals right? So for me, I think minerals are just a foundational conversation that need to be had with my clients, but in general, we should know about them.
Hmm. For people listening at home, what might be some of the minerals that are the most important? I feel like there's sometimes we think of vitamins and minerals as together. We might not know the difference. Could you?
Yeah, so I think all minerals are incredibly
Yeah.
important. That being said, the way that I look at minerals as kind of primary, secondary, and tertiary minerals. Your primary minerals are going to be things like calcium, magnesium, sodium, and potassium. And then you've got your secondary and tertiary minerals, things like zinc, boron, those kinds of things, those kinds of minerals. And I always like to think about a pyramid, right? So at the base of the pyramid, kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
Yep.
you're not going to start at the top, right? If you don't have the primary needs met. So at the base, I kind of look at calcium, magnesium, sodium, and potassium. It's not that those are more important than some of the minerals. I think the trace minerals, the secondary and tertiary minerals, kind of in the middle of the triangle and at the top of the triangle, are also incredibly important. You just need them in smaller quantities. And you can't really balance those secondary and tertiary minerals unless you have those primary minerals balanced. So in my practice, we work on all of it, but there's a really big kind of foundational focus on those primary minerals, which are calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium. A lot of people would put phosphorus in there as well. Um, but that's kind of how I look at it. So it's not necessarily like one's more important than the other. You need all of them. There are um, certain conditions and diseases that are associated with micronutrient mineral deficiencies. So it's not like one's more important than the other, but I like to focus on the primary ones because once you kind of get those primary relationships, those primary minerals balanced, they have interesting relationships, antagonistic and protagonistic relationships with those secondary and tertiary minerals.
Interesting. So you kind of lay the foundation and make sure that you have those on board, and then you
Exactly.
can move through to the next layer.
Yeah, and you can kind of do it also simultaneously, but I think that there's people think like, "Oh, if my magnesium is low, then I just need to take magnesium," right? Like these minerals work all in conjunction with one another. And we definitely use supplementation in my practice. I believe that it is impossible to be micronutrient sufficient living in the United States and participating in the kind of the agricultural system that we have here in the United States. But think about when you eat food, right? Like most foods have the vitamins and minerals um, and amino acids that all kind of work in conjunction with one another. I think it's a little irresponsible for us to think that you can just like supplement your way out of micronutrient deficiency. I think it's an important piece, but food is probably the more important kind of component to that.
Do you think our current farming practices and the way that our soils are depleted are the reason why so many of us are mineral deficient these days? I know I've read
Yes.
stats with like more than 90% of people being magnesium deficient, for example.
Yeah, so I think it's like 84% of the US population is magnesium deficient. My understanding is that only about 10% of the US population is metabolically healthy. And so if we take a look at an apple today has something like 80% less magnesium than it used to 50, 60, 70 years ago. The farmers who I believe are like the the foundation of America. I mean, farmers since the 1930s have been petitioning Congress about the state of the soil in the United States. This isn't new. The foods that we eat that are kind of grown conventionally through glyphosate and those kinds of things, like glyphosate pulls copper out of the ground. I would say that almost every single client that I work with is either has copper deficiency or has um, a bunch of bio unavailable copper on board, which makes it toxic.
Mhm.
And so, copper, like we get that from the soil. Um, and so, yeah, I think that I'm hoping this is changing with like conversations that we're having. I feel like podcasts like these make this conversation more accessible to people. But yeah, it's really atrocious what's happening with our farming communities. Um, you think you're eating healthy, right? You're eating, pork and beef and chicken, but you realize that chicken does not have the same mineral balance, right? Because it's eating a corn diet. Cows in this country, the only reason they don't die from the feed that they are fed is because they are slaughtered before that can happen. Like cows are not meant to eat corn and grain, they're meant to eat grass. And in the short term, they fatten up, which is all that, that's the metric, right? That they're getting paid per pound, just like farmers are being paid per acre, right? Yield versus the micronutrient makeup of the animals we're raising and of the crops that we're raising. And so, I think it's egregious what's happening in this country, and there's the population now represents, right? How unhealthy we can't disconnect ourselves from the land. We thought that we could be smarter than that, right? That we can like find these like factory ways to farm these animals and grow this food, and it's killing our population. And you can look at basic lifestyle diseases, asthma, diabetes, heart disease in this country, to look for proof.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of us are walking around deficient, but not really realizing that we might be. What are the tests that you would utilize? Because I know people will say, like, oh, well, I did my CBC and that was normal,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, I love, a CBC or a comprehensive metabolic panel. Like, I love blood chemistry, and I think that from a diagnostic perspective, and I'm not a medical doctor, so I don't use these labs to diagnose or treat diseases specifically. I use them to kind of inform general protocols. But um, you know, from a diagnostic perspective, blood chemistry has been around the longest, and so we have a lot of data there. But there's a time and a place for a kind of test. And so blood chemistry tests the transport system in the body. So blood transports, things to other places in the body. And when it comes to minerals, 95% of the minerals that are in your body actually are in the cell. They're not in the transport system, which is the blood. And so you might be able to, there are some minerals that you can test with blood, potassium, magnesium, um, but I love using a hair tissue mineral analysis. Um, I I use lots of different labs, but if I had to only run one lab on my clients, it would be an HTMA, because it gives you so much information. It's relatively inexpensive, so you can actually duplicate the lab and check for progress. And it tells you what's going on inside of the cell. And I always say that blood chemistry is kind of like an income statement. So it's like that day, that second, that moment, it gives you a snapshot into what's happening. An HTMA is kind of like a balance sheet for your business nerds out there that know the difference between a balance sheet and an income statement, where a balance sheet gives you like a 3-month window into what's happening into a business. And so I run an HTMA on every single one of my clients, to kind of see where we're starting from. Because if you go far enough upstream, and we talk about root cause analysis of symptoms, always almost at the very beginning is mineral and micronutrient deficiencies. So I love the HTMA. It's my favorite.
Interesting. And you like to use a test called the TEI test. Is that your favorite?
So the TEI is the brand. So
Uh-huh.
there's more than two companies that run labs. I think you can that run the hair tissue mineral analysis, but you can kind of break them up into labs that do a washed hair sample, and then labs that don't wash the hair sample. And based off the training that I have received, the labs that do not wash the hair sample actually make the results significantly more reliable, right? So methodology matters. I'm
Yeah.
sure you know that much better than I do. And so there's two companies that are out there. There was two guys, Watts, and I forgot the name, the other name of the guy, but they're the ones that kind of started this technology in the 70s, 60s, 70s. And then they had like uh, some beef, some beef back in the day. One created TEI, one created ARL. Um, I like TEI because they test for boron, where ARL
Mhm.
does not. But I actually like the ARL, minimum values, ideal values, and ranges. So I kind of do like a mix. So I use TEI because I always boron is so important, and then I use kind of the ARL markers, the levels to gauge whether or not my clients are above, below ideal, or within a range. So yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I know different lab tests, they can have like the normal reference range, but you don't want to be their normal. You want to be within a different range to be optimal. So that's interesting that you take the ARL reference ranges to apply it to the TEI test. I know I find there's a lot of different lab tests out there, like the Dutch test,
Yep.
organic acid test, that you need to have an advanced amount of knowledge and experience to read them properly.
Yeah.
And I feel the same goes for HTMA. Like you need to go through a lot of training to understand the
Yeah.
nuances of
I'm
the test. Is that
years
right?
into it and I still like rely on my clinical advisor and I run every single lab by my clinical advisor. Um, She's, I think, one of the smartest people in the world when it comes to hair tissue mineral analysis. And I think the word normal and common are often used
Yep.
interchangeably. And just because something is normal, which means, or common, which means that a lot of people experience it, doesn't necessarily mean that it's normal. And so, for example, with calcium, ARL has, they say that your ideal is around 40, 42, something like that, 40 to mid 40s. TEI says, I think 64 is the ideal. Well, I think this is where the ideological kind of split happened between the two guys that kind of started this line of testing, um, where one of them kept changing the ideals and the ranges as the population got ever more unhealthy. And that's exactly what happens with blood chemistry, right? Blood chemistry ranges. It's not telling, they say, okay, this is normal, right? They give you a range between 5 and 10. Well, what these companies, LabCorp, Quest do is they take an average of an everly increasingly unhealthy population and they say, here's the range. Well, have you ever gone to the doctor and run blood labs when like you're feeling great? Like probably not, right? So you've got unhealthy people going, running these labs, and then now we're just getting a statistical average versus like, well, what's ideal for a woman, for a man, for a woman in her 40s, for a man in his 20s? And so
Mhm.
I feel like ARL has had the better kind of ideals and ranges, and TEI has like the better technology, and they can test for more things. And so I think that who you work with, the practitioner that you work with, I think is very important because, you know, magnesium, for example, magnesium is an intracellular mineral. It needs to stay in the cell. And on the lab report, if you see magnesium is off the charts, I've actually had somebody, a clinical advisor of mine, not like the really good one that I love. Her name's Lisa, and she's the CEO of this amazing company called Vicon in Canada. Um, but you can uh I had this lab that had off the charts magnesium, and this clinical advisor is like, you should really pull back on magnesium. Are you supplementing with magnesium? And then I realized once I like gone through my own training, I was like, "Oh, a magnesium loss actually needs to be treated as if you're deficient." Because if
Mhm.
it's showing up on the lab, it means it's not staying in the cell. And if it's not staying in the cell, then like it's one of the primary macro minerals, like it needs to, so we need to actually support magnesium. So I think that I think minerals are very complicated. Like I said, I'm years into it and I still feel like I need continued education. I just want to constantly learn because it's such a broad topic.
Mhm. And it makes sense, like, I know with the organic acid test, sometimes I have metabolites that are high, and that might mean that the person needs more of
If they're
something,
low.
right?
Exactly.
And same with the hair. If you're
Yep.
wasting a lot of magnesium from
Yep.
your body and you're burning through it,
Yep.
then it's gonna show up in your hair. Um, I'm curious. I know that you and I both have had our thyroid journeys, and there's so many different ways and things we can do to help ourselves.
Yeah.
Was HTMA part of your healing journey with your thyroid or your
Yeah. I
hormones?
mean, I think you and I have a very unique situation where we both had a Chernobyl exposure,
Yeah.
right? And so and there's lots of different reasons why people have a hypo or a hyperthyroid, thyroid dysfunction. But there there are 9 minerals that your thyroid needs in order to like actually operate. Iodine being one of them. I believe T4 has 4 molecules of iodine. T3 has 3 molecules of iodine. And so, do you have an iodine, like, do you have a thyroid deficiency or do you have a mineral deficiency? And so I think that, magnesium is necessary, iodine is necessary. There's all of these zinc, molybdenum, boron, iodine, chromium, manganese, magnesium, copper, right? So I don't know how many that was. I think that was 9, but you need all of these minerals to be on board in order for your thyroid to work. And so, do you really have a deficiency in thyroid hormone, or do you have a deficiency in these minerals? And so that your body isn't able to these minerals essentially act as like cofactors in these like enzymatic reactions, right? So think about your body as trying to do something, create thyroid stimulating hormone or create T4, T3. And it's almost like a cauldron, right? And you're putting different things into the cauldron, and you need, let's say there's 20 things that you need in order to convert T4 into T3. And so, okay, well, if you have all but 4 of them, that's not good enough, right? It's like baking almost. Like you need to have precise measurements of things. And so, that's what I mean by like going far enough, uphill. And so there's another thing when it comes to like minerals. And so, especially with like, so for obviously your thyroid girlies and gals. And so oftentimes they test for the blood, they test for TSH. And so that's your thyroid stimulating hormone. And you might have adequate levels of that thyroid stimulating hormone in your blood. But remember, the blood is a transport system, and that thyroid stimulating hormone has to get into every cell in your body, right? There's a receptor on every single cell in your body. Well, if you have been under long-term, long-standing chemical, biochemical, physical, emotional stress, when your body is at stress, a lot of things happen, but a very significant thing that happens is that your adrenals produce cortisol. Well, cortisol is a catabolic hormone, which means it's the exact opposite of an anabolic hormone, right? It breaks you down at a cellular level. I think we need cortisol in short amounts, right? There's a stressor that happens, and then the stress goes away and the cortisol goes away. Well, when you are on the receiving end of years, decades, many decades of stress, and this cortisol is breaking you down at a cellular level, the body's like miraculous. It's so cool. It says, okay, we really can't handle, right, any more cortisol. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the calcium, which is a hard, crunchy mineral. It's very problematic when it doesn't stay in your hair and in your bones, which is where the majority of your calcium lives. So your body says, all right, like Issa's been under stress for 20 years, we're going to start pulling calcium out of her bones and out of her teeth. And we're going to start calcifying every single cell in her body because we can't have any more cortisol in the cells. It's like we can't tolerate this anymore. And so well, guess what? Magnesium needs to get into the cells. Sodium, potassium, which are responsible for cell membrane permeability, which is so important. Thyroid stimulating hormone, it needs to get into the cell. And so this solution that the body is presenting is very binary, right? Things get in or things don't get in. And so do you really have a thyroid problem? Well, if you were just to look at blood chemistry, and then you're super frustrated, right? Because your doctor for the 5th year in a row has said your TSH is normal. It's within range, which we already talked about why that's a problem, but maybe it is. Maybe you have normal levels of thyroid stimulating hormone in your blood, but it's not getting into the cell, which is where it needs to live. So now you are walking around with hair loss, with anxiety, with dry skin, with, all sorts of, brain fog, all sorts of thyroid symptoms. And so I think that's where the conversation isn't so. It's very nuanced, right? It's not just about the thyroid stimulating hormone. It's about, is it getting to where it needs to go?
Mm-hmm.
So there's 2 things, right? So now all of a sudden you have osteoporosis, osteopenia, low bone density, right? And they're like, okay, here's some calcium for you, right? Well, calcium works with magnesium. And if you still are having all of that stress, right, you're just intensifying that calcification of soft tissue. And then also now maybe on top of the osteoporosis and the osteopenia, you have a hypothyroid because the TSH isn't getting into the cell. And so it's complicated, man.
Yeah. Yeah, I first really started to appreciate the role of minerals. I think magnesium was probably my gateway drug into it, where I saw research on how magnesium can help with thyroid function, long term supplementation of magnesium can actually normalize the appearance of a thyroid gland on an ultrasound.
Yeah.
Typically, like 5+ years is what you need. Zinc is so important for producing TSH. And then somewhere along my thyroid journey, I found out I had copper toxicity
Mhm.
and I had this like beautiful chin acne and just insomnia, anxiety, some of those like
Funsies.
symptoms really, really activating. And my integrative doctor was like, let's do some chelation for you. The chelation got me a full body rash because it overloaded my system
Yep.
and I became molybdenum deficient. I didn't know I was molybdenum deficient. For a while, I was just constantly like, I couldn't eat any eggs, anything with sulfur
Yep.
was causing me like a full body rash. And I do mean full body, like mucous membranes, all kinds of things just from having that intolerance. And I got into mineral testing at that point. And I'm not an expert by any means. I'm like, I need at least like 10 more years of studying this to like
Same. I
feel
feel like
confident.
same. Like it's so complicated. Yeah.
But I started taking I found that I was low in molybdenum, I started taking the molybdenum, and what it did is it cleared my copper toxicity and it cleared up my skin and all of my reactions to like eggs, broccoli, and sulfury foods. So ever since that point, I've had like a really huge, huge appreciation.
Yeah, well, I think you just brought home a really important point, which is minerals work in conjunction with each other. And so, one of the first things, and I think early days in my own practitioner journey, you know, I had clients that had a hard time sleeping. I'd be like, take magnesium. It's the
Mm.
magic thing. Everybody's deficient. Well, you really shouldn't be taking magnesium until your sodium and potassium ratio is balanced. And if you don't balance your sodium and potassium ratio and you're taking a bunch of magnesium, it can actually really negatively impact the thyroid. And so these minerals all have antagonistic and protagonistic relationships with each other. And so yes, you want to understand okay, individual mineral values, and you want to be within the ideal or kind of in the ideal range. But I actually think, and this is why I love the hair tissue mineral analysis, the HTMA lab, is one of the things that you can look at is mineral ratios. So, for example, the first thing that I kind of look at is your calcium to your Ca to P ratio, and so that's going to tell me whether or not you are a slow oxidizer or a fast oxidizer. And slow oxidation has a whole host of like symptoms and causes, and fast oxidation has a whole slew of symptoms and causes. And what we're trying to find is balance, right? So a slow oxidizer is parasympathetic nervous system dominant, right? Calcium really impacts the parasympathetic nervous system. And then if you're above a 2.6 Ca to P ratio, you're a slow oxidizer. If you're below 2.6, you're a fast oxidizer. And so these understanding the ratios of things, there's a thyroid ratio, there's an adrenal ratio, that along with your metabolic rate or your oxidation rate really tells you about like the energy potential of the body, right? The adrenals, the thyroid. And so I think that oftentimes it's very easy to just look at like an individual like marker, an individual mineral, and the ideal and the range, but really the relationships between some of these ratios, I would almost venture to say is even more important than the actual individual levels. And doing this like a la carte, I'm going to take some magnesium here and some molybdenum here and some like without really understanding the whole picture, I think can
Mhm.
cause other problems, right? Because these minerals all have these relationships with one another. So that's like your example. Unfortunately, I'm sorry that you had experienced that, but that's the exact reason why, I don't guess, I test so that we
Yeah.
can kind of see what's happening long term. And then the lab is relatively inexpensive to repeat relative to like a Dutch test or some of these other, like some of the Cyrex, like I
$1 million later.
yeah, where you're like, "Okay, like, I have 0 money left." So I like it because, again, I'm not using this lab to, like, diagnose anything or treat anything specifically, but it's giving me information that I can use to kind of directionally put together these protocols that don't treat the body specifically, but they treat the body holistically, and I think that's the difference between, like, me and a medical doctor, and there's a place for medical doctors, but there's if the medical doctor kind of solution was the end all be all, we wouldn't be in the place that we are right now. So I think, we as kind of holistic functional practitioners need to understand what's in our scope of practice. And then also, I feel like there's a huge opportunity with medical doctors to understand that they don't know everything, that they don't understand everything, that actually their training has intentionally excluded so many things that are very important for the body. And understanding and respecting each other as we all walk in our own lanes, I think is really, really important.
Mhm. Yeah, I know definitely it wasn't my integrative doctor that recommended the HTMA test. It was a clinic in Chicago that I actually interned at when I was in pharmacy school. It was like an integrative clinic, and they did a lot of HTMA testing for toxins and all kinds of things. And I kind of had recalled that they worked with copper toxicity. And I was like, let me see if I could work with this clinic to see if they could help me with that. And they were the ones that were like, okay, this is something that was brought to my attention, that molybdenum was something that was super depleted, and then getting everything balanced was
Yeah.
helpful. Um, another place where I had a lot of appreciation for minerals was with electrolytes. So we know a lot of times people with adrenal and thyroid issues are going to be super electrolyte deficient.
Yeah.
And just taking a basic electrolyte powder can be very, very helpful with that. But sometimes you might need to adjust the ratios, right? I know sometimes people might need more sodium or they might need more potassium.
Yeah. Well, again, I know there's a couple of these. When we're talking about electrolytes, we're just talking about minerals, by the way, right? We're talking about potassium, we're talking about sodium, and so I know that there's these like powders that we put into water. That's very, that's very kind of in vogue. I think minerals are becoming more in vogue, which I like, and I think that there are brands that are really preying on customers as well. So the electrolyte blend that you're probably taking, I'm not going to name it by name, but they have, you know, things in there that they don't disclose, and also the ratio to sodium and potassium is off, right? And so I, for example, say, okay, if you are a slow oxidizer, if you're somebody that's stressed out, hello, 100% of the US population, your adrenals are working really hard. So one of the very first things, there's four foundational things I do with all of my clients. And I think the second or third thing is to do an adrenal cocktail, which is orange juice. You're getting your vitamin C. So orange juice, or you can do lemon juice if you don't want some of the sugars that are in orange juice, which by the way are actually good for you in certain circumstances. Excuse me. And then it's cream of tartar, which is potassium tartrate.
Mhm.
So I'll do a quarter of a cup to a half a cup of organic orange juice. I love Harmless Harvest coconut water because it's cold pressed. So I'll do a quarter of a cup, half a cup of that. And then I'll do a quarter teaspoon of a good sea salt, something like that. And then I'll do a quarter teaspoon of potassium tartrate, which is cream of tartar, which you can get all of these things at your local grocery store. And I think that goes heads and shoulders above some of these like electrolyte like powders. You can do that, I'd say one or two times a day, depending on kind of your personal circumstances. But yeah, like there, I think it's very important to get your micronutrients from food sources versus supplementation. There's a place for supplementation, but it's supplemental, right? It's supplemental to the food that you're eating. And so, you know, instead of doing like a synthetic vitamin C, I love camu. I like orange juice. I like these things that are whole foods that your body is meant to process. So it's like, okay, you take something, but how much of it is actually being digested? How much of it is actually being absorbed? And then if it's being absorbed, is it then be getting transported to the cell? If it's being transported to the cell, is the cell letting it in? So there's this entire kind of chain of things that need to happen. So it's not just like, okay, you're eating a bunch of protein, but we only absorb about 30% of the animal-based protein that we eat. Plant-based protein, I'd say, is probably 10 10 to 15% of that we're actually absorbing, right? So it's like, I'm not saying that one is better than the other, but one definitely absorbs better than the other. And that kind of line of thinking can be applied to your all of your micronutrients, not just your minerals. So I think some of those electrolyte powders, I think the thought is good, right? Like the intention is good. But what do they say? What the road to hell is lined with with good intentions.
Full disclosure, I have an electrolyte blend that I love, and I made it
Yeah,
with D-ribose and some electrolytes and high dose vitamin C
great.
just to make sure that we stay balanced. And
Yeah,
I like to utilize it with the adrenal cocktail. But
perfect.
I feel like there's a lot of different healing modalities that we could pull on
Yeah.
to like people don't have to do that. Like they can just go to their grocery store and they can just utilize
Well,
camu, right? There's so many different options that
I
people
I
have.
think that uh who you buy your stuff from really matters. Somebody that understands, right? Like what is it? Was it dextrose? So it was a sugar that the brand that I'm talking about had a bunch of sugar. It's essentially a type of sugar that they didn't list on the label. I forgot what it was.
Hmm.
But that if you're a diabetic, if you are like, it's going to raise your blood sugar. It's an issue,
Mhm.
right? And then, the source matters, right? Like,
Mhm.
gosh, I don't know how many different forms of magnesium there are, right? Magnesium tartrate, magnesium citrate, magnesium mag oxide. Okay, magnesium oxide has like a 3 to 6% bioavailability. There's a place for it. Your body thinks it's poison, and so it like flushes your
Wow.
system. Well, if you look at magnesium malate or one of the higher bioavailable magnesiums, that matters, right? And so you've got a lot of. I had somebody in my family who, man, was her doctor just told her take some magnesium. She pulled something off of like Costco shelf, and it was magnesium oxide. And you can now have magnesium toxicity in your body because it's not bioavailable. You're taking all of this every single day. Your body doesn't know what to do with it. It's flushing you, right? It's taking maybe some other, minerals and things out of your body. And we had to switch her to a higher, more bioavailable form.
Mhm.
And so I think it's really important to educate yourself because I don't think that there's a lot of like ethics, right? Where it's like, I bet you, if your electrolyte powder, complex is going to be very different than this brand that I'm thinking of, because you have integrity and you have training. That's not the case with everybody. And I think that one of the most unfortunate things that's happening is like we're having to practice defensive eating. Like, oh, I want, pasture raised. It's, what is it with the eggs, right? It's like cage free. Well, what does that mean, right? It means literally
Ridiculous.
nothing.
Yeah.
And then now it's like, okay, pasture raised. Like, what does that mean? Literally nothing. You buy beef and it says grass fed on there. Okay, cool. It was grass fed for 5 minutes. Oh, it's still grass fed, but 95% of the diet was the corn. And so there's this like ridiculous situation that's happening in the United States where you have to practice like defensive eating. And it can be, from a listener's perspective, it can be incredibly overwhelming because you feel like you are trying to make good decisions for you and your children and your family. And then you learn another piece of information, right? And it's like, oh, this has lead in it and arsenic and mercury and all of these things. And so, I remember at the beginning of my health and wellness journey going to Trader Joe's and standing in front of like the aisles and having just learned a little bit of information and being like, I do not know what to eat for dinner.
Yeah, it
And
can be overwhelming.
and if you have children and you're in this place where you now know that like some of this stuff is literal poison, but you don't know a healthy alternative. So I think that's why, as practitioners, we have to be so careful about like what we promote and like what we do. And then also as, consumers, it's just you have to find people that you trust and people that have like earned your trust.
Yeah, yeah, it's ridiculous. I know I've spent a lot of money trying to get like the eggs that were created the right way, right? And then you find out, oh, this really does not mean anything, right?
Yeah, like I just read, a lot of times people say, "Oh, this egg yolk is so yellow," right? And it's like, "Oh, okay, so that means it's grass-fed and it's healthy." All right, cool. One of the biggest, brands in the United States for pasture-raised eggs, they put turmeric in their feed.
And that gives it the appearance. I know the food marketing is really, really, I mean, it's
It's
disingenuous. I know I grew up thinking that to get more energy, I just needed to eat more Subway
Mhm.
sandwiches because that was the messaging that we got in the
Yeah.
commercials. Um, One of the things that really I struggled with after having my son was my teeth became demineralized. And I know this is something that you talk about how and you had your first baby at 45, which is amazing.
Yep.
And then you breastfed for a full year.
Yep.
Incredible. But you were very surprised about some of the changes that occurred. And I think this is very relevant for a lot of women. They start having health challenges after pregnancy, right?
Yes. Yes, because pregnancy is going to be like the most difficult thing that you've ever done in your entire life. I mean,
Yeah.
you're literally growing a skeletal system, a brain, organs, muscular system, like all the things. And so there's this, I think women are now waiting longer and longer to have babies. And so there's kind of two simultaneous things happening. Like one, you're growing a human. Two, like I was definitely perimenopausal. Like around 45 is like usually when like estrogen kind of tanks. So, estrogen is very, very important in the body. It is neuroprotective. It reduces inflammation. It's cardiac protective. But one of the things that also it does is it helps with bone density. So here I am. I am taking everything that my baby needs is it's getting from my body, right? It's getting all the calcium and magnesium and sodium and potassium and like all the things that it needs it's getting from me. So now I'm depleted, right? And then in the first 6 months if you're breastfeeding, which I firmly believe if you can, you should, um, especially with the state of formula in the United States, how there's lead and mercury and
Mm.
arsenic and all of it. Um, so if you can, you should be breastfeeding. Well, a breastfeeding mother will lose up to 20% of her bone density within the first 6 months of breastfeeding. So I breastfed for a year, right?
Yeah.
So I grew a baby. I breastfed for a year. Simultaneously, my estrogen is probably on the decline. So I'm already, and one of the things, the estrogen does is it helps, improve your bone density. So there's these like kind of simultaneous things that are happening. And then if you are older, like I am, I'm on my second baby, but I want a third. And so I'm
Amazing.
like, it's like a mental illness. I like want three of these babies. So now I'm not waiting as long, right? Because like I would really like to be done breastfeeding by the time I'm 50, because it's just like not the vibe I'm looking for. And so like, right? And so now I'm kind of condensing and collapsing that space in between babies. Like I will not wait 2 years to get pregnant in between my second and third baby.
Yeah, the ideal is like 3 to 4 years to get
Yes.
replenished, but
Mhm.
sometimes when our biological clock is ticking, we might not have that time to like remineralize. So you're actually advocate for being very proactive and getting replenished. And
Yes.
there are a lot of overlooked minerals for pregnant and breastfeeding moms. Could you tell us more about those?
Yeah, well, so, I mean, gosh, I mean, all of them, but, like, calcium, magnesium, sodium, and
Yeah.
potassium are, like, so, so important, um, and, and I really think that you need to be doing this, like, ideally, like, 12 months, like, if I always say, like, "I wish I could have 12 months with you," like, "Can you wait 12 months?" Most of my
Yeah.
clients are like, "No, I'll give you 3
3
to
days.
6." Usually, I can get them to say 3 to 6 once I can kind of explain, like, the impact of all of this. And so if you can start balancing your minerals, right? 12 months ahead of time. So then you're balancing minerals. There's certain things that you can do before you can be a little bit more aggressive with minerals before you're pregnant. And then we can switch to a prenatal blend. And then when you're breastfeeding, I do a breastfeeding blend. So I do a custom mineral blend, vitamin mineral blend. There's other things in there. Sometimes I put collagen in there. Sometimes I put iodine in there, extra molybdenum, extra like boron, like all the things. But then when you're breastfeeding, so I probably close to a year before I miscarried. And I was
I
like,
hear that.
why can't I stay pregnant? And so I did my first HTMA probably 6 to 8 months before I actually got pregnant again with my first baby. Balanced minerals. I was able to kind of go like hard and hard and heavy with the minerals. And then I was able to pull back a little bit and create a custom prenatal for myself. And then while I was breastfeeding, right? You need, I think it's like 4 to 500 milligrams of calcium. Let's just focus specifically on calcium. I think it's very
Mhm.
important, while you're breastfeeding. And if you're not getting that either through food and or supplementation, I think it needs to be a combination of the two. You may never recover. Your
Wow.
bone density may never recover. So now we're looking at osteoporosis, osteopenia well before that is something that should be happening. And I believe it's not something that should ever happen. I actually think that it's an environmental condition that can be completely prevented. Um, and so, as you are going through these different stages, you are you're able to kind of give your body what it needs. And so many of my clients, it literally like the first year of my son's life is like such an amazing time. And it makes me so sad. I could like cry just thinking about it that so many of my clients don't remember their kid's first year
Wow.
because they're so deficient in calcium and magnesium, which are calming minerals. It's like your body's Xanax. It's kind of like progesterone.
Yeah.
And they have such a deficiency because they were deficient before the pregnancy, and then they've breastfed and they're really deficient now. And now they can't handle stress because they don't have the things on board that allow you to handle stress. And so here they are, their kid is 1 or 2 years old. They don't remember the first year of life. They're completely stressed out. And now they want a second baby and they can't get pregnant or they can't stay pregnant. And so it's this like vicious cycle. So I think that, I was a geriatric mom. I think I was 44 when I got pregnant, 45 when Noah was born. I had no nausea. I had no like morning sickness. After he was born, none of my hair fell out. I mean, again, these are all things that are very common, but are they normal? I would venture to say maybe not. And again, now I'm 40 how old am I? Am I 40 I'm 46. This little dude will be born, and 3 weeks later, I turn 47. So, I'm a really old mom from a, like, biology perspective. Again, no morning sickness with the second baby. And I've had, like, the most easy breezy both pregnancies. You would think it would be just the opposite. And so I think that there's things that you can do that support your body. that I think are really important. And you were kind of talking about copper toxicity.
Yeah.
So in the third trimester is when we transfer a lot of copper to the baby. Copper is actually a really it's nature's antibacterial, antifungal,
Yeah.
anti-mold, but you need a couple of things on board in order to make copper bioavailable. And so if you don't have ceruloplasm, which is an enzyme that's made in the liver, if you don't have vitamin A, um, uh, uh, um, then the copper becomes bio unavailable, which is synonymous with copper toxic. And there's a lot of symptoms that are associated with copper toxicity. And so, you know, then you're downloading a lot of this like bio unavailable copper to your baby. And now your baby's baseline is much higher than it's supposed to be. And as they get older and they accumulate, and this is true with other heavy metals, we download. Pregnancy is a detoxification event for
For the
women.
mom. Yep.
Yeah, and so it's like you get to dump all of this stuff out of your body, but, like, it's not great that you're dumping mercury and lead and all the things to your baby as well. And so I think that it's very, very important, especially now because of the environment that we live in, because of the stressors that we're under. Um, you know, calcium and magnesium are depleted by stress. So, you need to really take a modern approach. This wasn't necessary 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 10,000 years ago, but it's necessary now.
Can we talk about vitamin A for a minute? Because I feel like that was probably the reason why I became
Copper
toxic,
toxic, yeah.
is I have this gene variation where essentially I can have all the carrots and all the beta carotene in the world, and my body does not turn it into active
Mhm.
vitamin A. And a lot of us actually have these variations. So people grew up hearing like eat your carrots to get your or eat your carrots to get your vitamin A. But is that necessarily the best source of vitamin A? Can we talk about that a little bit?
So, well, there's lots of different sources of vitamin A. But let's talk about the relationship between copper, ceruloplasm, and vitamin A. Um, and so the ceruloplasm, it's an enzyme that's produced in the liver. And I want you to think about that as like the bus. It's a bus, right? There's a bus.
Mhm.
And in order for copper, also iron, by the way, um, for the movement of iron in the body, copper needs to kind of link up with its buddy ceruloplasm. So, copper is at the bus stop and ceruloplasm is the bus. It stops and copper wants to get on the bus. But copper can't get on the bus unless vitamin A opens the door.
Okay.
So vitamin A opens the door to the bus so copper can get on. And so um I think it's more important, right, that you've got the ceruloplasm, that you've got the copper, and you have the vitamin A. And yeah, I mean, there's lots of different sources of vitamin A. I think, off the top of my head, I don't even know, but I think the vitamin A, copper, and ceruloplasm connection is very, very important. You also like if when iron and ceruloplasm and vitamin A are really, really important for the movement of iron.
Mhm.
And so it's not necessarily that you are low in iron. It might be that the iron isn't moving in the body. It's supposed to go in and it's supposed to move in and out of cells. And so that's where like the ceruloplasm and the vitamin A is really, really important.
What some of the HTMA practitioners that I've talked to talk about how the retinol version of vitamin A is the one that you need. Would you agree with
I
that?
would
Is that
agree
your
with yes, I would
experience?
agree with that.
Yeah.
So, like, Greek yogurt, like milk, like those kinds of like animal-based
Cod liver
sources.
oil, I think is a popular one.
Cod liver oil is really
Yeah.
important. It's super important. So, yeah, cod liver oil. I would say animal-based sources,
Mhm.
but both are important. But this is kind of when I was talking about the absorption of protein in the body, right? Like you can eat hemp seeds all day long. I love them. I put them in my Greek yogurt, but it's not going to be the same as eating a piece of grass-fed beef,
Mhm.
right? For the protein and the absorption. So quantity matters, source matters, right? And so I would say animal sources of your vitamin A is going to be
Bioavailable.
more bio. It comes
Yep.
down to bioavailability, and I think that also you need to have variety, and there's lots of other things at play. So yeah, I would say so I do, for example, cod liver oil in my smoothies. I give those to my son. I also put hemp seeds in there, I also put other things in there as well. So yeah, I would say focus on, and I think this is really unpopular, because I think there's this huge like plant strong movement.
Yeah.
I actually believe that only 10% of the world's population like should actually be vegetarian or vegan. Like it the most unhealthy clients I see are vegetarians and vegans.
That's been my similar experience in people with Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism,
Mhm.
and they go on a healthy diet that's grass-fed meat.
Yeah.
After, typically they start off like McDonald's and then they go vegan, and of course you're going to feel better when
Mhm.
clean up your diet, but then they
Sure.
really can get stuck, and a lot of the things that help them feel better is like organic, grass-fed red
Yeah.
meat, and that's such a rich
Liver,
source, and liver
organs,
of vitamin A,
liver. I mean,
carnitine.
copper used is a huge. I mean, you have a lot of vitamin A and copper in liver and beef organs, but be careful of what you're eating, right? The liver is a filtration organ, and so if you're eating cows that are eating poison that would literally kill them if they were on that diet long enough, um, then you're you're not getting where you need to go.
So organic liver is what you would recommend. You wouldn't
Gra
go with like
gra
just conventional, you would go
No, 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 no,
grass-fed.
no, 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 no. Yeah, you've gotta, like New Zealand has really great standards around, like, grass-fed animals, those kinds of things, like, um, you start learning, like, tricks of the trade, so it's like, "Okay, I'll do a non-organic lamb from New Zealand,"
Okay.
but I wouldn't do that here. Um, so, yeah, I think that I mean, Polish people eat gross stuff, I think.
I agree.
So, like, one of my earliest foods that, like, my aunt made was, like, liver and onions and mashed potatoes. I love to eat liver. But also you need to understand, like, okay, ancestrally, how did we eat these organs? We would slaughter a buffalo, we would slaughter a cow, we would eat the organs right away. We weren't eating liver every single day. And so I think it's important to kind of understand we're never going to be able to eat an ancestral diet. It's impossible. Um, and so, but you do need to understand, like, okay, it was like something that we would cycle, right? It wasn't like every single day I would be eating like a chunk of liver. You would eat it while it was fresh. And then you wouldn't eat it for a while. And so, yeah, I think those are to your original question. I think those are like great sources of vitamin A versus like what is bioavailable, right? Your body never takes something in its original form and uses it. It takes it and transforms it into something else through methylation and so you need to be able to give your body the things that it needs in order for that metabolic process to happen. And I think that there are good, better, best, options that are out there. But I also think that you don't want to get stuck in like this like paralysis and I'm never gonna, or be very binary with how you think about food. I think there's a place for much of it.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense, but I appreciate you talking about the devil's also in the details, because you could be eating liver every day that's not organic, not
Mhm.
grass-fed, and you can actually have toxicity
Yeah,
from that.
it can be very detrimental. I mean, you get what you pay for,
Yeah.
and you can pay for something with money or time or energy, right? You can grow your own vegetables, which you're spending energy, or you can, go to a farmer's market and spend a little bit more. And I always say, like, you know, what's more like cancer is pretty expensive,
Yeah.
and 90 to 95% of all diseases out there are environmental, which means 5 to 10% of all the diseases that are out there are genetic. But we have to understand that genetics loads the gun and it's our environment that pulls the trigger. And so you're not destined to live out your genes. And so that means, some of the things that I do, I don't eat farm raised fish. I eat wild fish. I try to eat more bottom of the seafood chain. I eat grass fed, I only eat grass fed meat unless I'm at a restaurant. Like I'm not like a super weirdo about it, but if I'm at a restaurant with friends, okay, maybe, the 5%, 10% that I'm eating out, I'm not eating grass fed, but at home, that's what my son is eating. I always eat organic fruits and vegetables. Does that mean that there's no pesticides? No. There are pesticides on organic fruits and vegetables,
Unfortunately.
unfortunately, but it's like a good, better, best thing, right?
Yeah.
I haven't had any alcohol in probably close to 7 years. Now that with the 30% of all breast cancers are because of alcohol. Like that has been known for a while, but more so recently. So it's like I make these decisions and they're not like these big decisions. It's these tiny little decisions that I make on a daily basis that stack up to like really big results. And then I also follow, people like you and I listen to podcasts and I'm like learning and I'm trying to make this a way of life so that I can have a long life because I'm an old ass mom, first time mom.
And you're so vibrant and full of energy, and it's just like you're walking your walk and,
Yeah.
talking your talk, and I mean, I know you and you're so vibrant and energetic that I feel
Thank
like
you.
you have more energy and more patience than most moms in their 20s,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you. It's been a journey and it wasn't easy at the beginning and I was overwhelmed and confused and as with anything that's like worth having or doing in life, it's worth putting a little bit of energy because you get to pick your hard, right? Like I get to pick my hard now, which is maybe, spending a little bit more time with like food, or I get to pick my hard, which is my kid has some sort of like situation that is environmental. So I think that we all have an opportunity to pick our hard um and I think making these small decisions on a daily basis are probably I think it's the easier of the two hards, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. I wanted to ask a little question about, do minerals impact hidden infections? Because I know this is a common root cause in Hashimoto's is these infections that are essentially like low grade and people may not be fully aware of them, but they could absolutely set off the immune system.
Yeah. So, if we take a look at stress leads to metabolic chaos leads to symptoms and disease. And like I said, 90 to 95% of all the diseases out there are kind of environmental. And if we kind of look at some of the things that I deal with in my practice, it's things like heavy metal toxicity, which is kind of environmental, but there's kind of pathogens like bacteria, mold, funguses that so many of my clients really deal with. And so, if you take a look at your stomach acid, I mean, this seems like so basic, but your stomach acid is like the electric fence of your body. And so we live in this moldy, parasitey, virusy, bacterially world. And the first line of defense between this like toxic external world and this pristine internal world is your stomach acid. So you
Hmm.
can think about these pathogens, molds, bacterias, viruses as zombies. And you can think of the stomach acid as an electric fence. And in order to make stomach acid, you need sodium, hydrochloric acid. You need sodium. And what is one of the most villainized minerals out there? The American Heart Association will tell you that you need to be on a low sodium diet in order to protect your heart. Well, if you take a look at sodium consumption and plot cardiac arrests over the last 50 years, 75 years, you can see that sodium is incredibly low has gone down, and then cardiac events have gone up. So I think it's in just like fat was the villainized macronutrient. I think sodium is the villainized micronutrient. It's like the redheaded stepchild of the mineral world when you look at conventional practitioners and doctors. And so you have to have sodium in order to make hydrochloric acid. And when you don't have enough stomach acid, then the mold, the bacteria, the parasites, the viruses can get into your system and colonize. And that's the source of so many of these hidden infections in folks with like Hashi and like really like like all of these conditions. And I think that it's very, very important that you have enough like good quality, sodium on board. And unfortunately, doctors, when you have things like GERD or acid reflux or, this like, the acid kind of going up the wrong way, these doctors tell you that it's because you have too much stomach acid and they put you on a proton pump inhibitor, a PPI, right? And I would say that almost 100% of the time, it's because you actually have too little stomach acid. And so you already have too little stomach acid, right? And then you go to the doctor. So you're already susceptible to these hidden infections. And then you go to the doctor and they put you on a PPI and it lowers your stomach acid even more. And now all of a sudden, you're running, labs with me and you have an H. pylori infection, which reduces stomach acid even
Even
more.
further.
Um, and then you have, all these other like kind of bad bacteria that are like out of range, out of control. I'm seeing on the oat, I run the oat as well with a lot of my clients. You see like a full mold profile where there's all the mold is on board. And mold, I think, is mold and C. diff. So, pathogenic, these bacteria that are just like really like C. diff and mold specifically is incredibly, and it's an immunosuppressant.
Yeah.
And so now you've got this mold on board and now your immune system is suppressed. So between the suppressed immune system and the low stomach acid, your electric fence, I mean, the zombies have taken over. I mean, game over. It's very difficult to come back from that, especially when your primary care physician doesn't speak this language and thinks all of this stuff is BS.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And looking at the studies in Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism, most people have low stomach acid or no stomach
Yep.
acid, and they'll have these acid reflux symptoms, which are oftentimes driven by stress, H. pylori, food sensitivities, right?
Mhm.
You're reacting to something, but they'll get placed on acid suppressing medications, which then allow the H. pylori to grow, which then allows SIBO to grow, and then we're at risk for getting protozoa, various nutrient
Yeah.
deficiencies. I've seen proton pump inhibitors specifically, I would put them at the list of things, medications that should just never be used long term.
Yeah. It
And they can really deplete us and lead to I feel like they can worsen thyroid issues for sure.
I mean, for sure, so in addition to the sodium, you need chloride, you need sodium, potassium, you need zinc, some of these other, sodium is a primary mineral, but like you also need zinc, you also need chloride in order to make stomach acid. And so, yes, I think these hidden infections, I mean, it's just so sad because they destroy your life, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's talk about like the implications of this, which is I can't go to sleep at night because bacteria and parasites are more active at night, right? The creepy crawlies come out at night. So now you can't sleep. And then you are, dead in the morning. You're like, can't get out of bed. Your kid is like trying to get you to get up. You're white knuckling life. And I think that's the implications of all of these things. And I think this is again where like practitioners need to really understand like, you've got these humans that are trying to like do amazing things in the world, to raise a kid, build a business, do something with nonprofits, and they just don't have the life force, the energy, the vitality to do any of these things. Um, and I think that's where like the conversations where I'm always stoked where like medical doctors want to talk to, nutritionists or FTNPs, like your education is like surpasses mine from like a medical perspective, but it's like the fact that we can have these conversations and that like I can learn from you and you can learn from me, I think is so mission critical. And I just encourage all the practitioners out there to do that because it's egregious that people don't do it because the information is so readily available right now with like the proliferation of like podcasts and stuff like that. So I think these kinds of conversations are so important, not just for, like the people that are suffering through these conditions, but also the practitioners that are trying to help them through them.
Maya, you've been such an inspiration. It's been so wonderful to have you here with us.
Thanks.
I love all of the insights that you've shared with us. I'm like, okay, I need an HTMA test right now.
Stat, let's go. I should have brought one with me.
Right? Where is it?
Yeah. What was I thinking?
Where can people find more information about you or working with you? And do you have any resources for our community?
Yes. So you can go to majamiller.com. It's Maya with a J. I'm sure you'll link all the things in the show notes. That is where you can actually schedule a call with me. I do free workshops all the time. I'm not sure when this is going to air, but I periodically do a free workshop called Mineral Magic. And so I'll give you the link to that as well. And it's a 90-minute workshop that's absolutely free that walks you through minerals, metabolism, how to test, all the things. I just believe so much in the power of minerals and their impact on a healthy metabolism, that it's just like a talk that I like to do. And I love meeting people live. And so like my marketing and Facebook people are like, just make it a evergreen thing. I'm like, no, I love talking to people. I love hearing like what's going on with them. And then you can work with me privately. And that's the Inside Out protocol, kind of the next level. And for those folks that maybe that's not as accessible, I just launched a group program that we've beta tested to 2 or 3 rounds of people, and it went really well. And so I'm really excited about this because lab testing and working with practitioners can be really, really cost prohibitive for a lot of people. And so I have this 8-week program. It's the group version of the Inside Out protocol where we run 3 clinical labs and we put together kind of tailored protocols and a power plan based off of those particular labs. So everybody's plan is different. It's bio-individual. It takes into account their biography, everything that they've experienced in their past. And so there's lots of different ways to work with me, but going to majamiller.com is probably the best place to go.
Perfect. We'll put that in the show notes. And I love group programs because I feel like they teach people how to fish. And I feel like there's a huge opportunity for people to really educate themselves.
Yeah.
So they can care for themselves in the long term.
No, my partner in crime in this program is another amazing FDNP. Her name is Becca, and I'm really excited. I mean, we've had lots of conversations over the years, which is like, man, so many people want and need this work, but they just can't afford it. And so we beta tested this 8-week program to about 40 people, and we had insane off the charts results. And so there is a place for my one-on-one work. Sometimes you don't want to make a group call, or like you are, a high profile, kind of person that like needs things to be, time-wise kind of very tailored to them. So we still do that. But really, I believe so much in this program now that like 95% of my effort is going to the group program. And there's also something nice about like talking to other people that are experiencing the same thing as you, and you don't feel so dang alone in all of this, which I think is a very unfortunate effect, where you feel like nobody feels like this. Everybody else has this amazing life and you're the only one that's like so sick and can't like pull it together. And so I'm really excited about the group program.
Yeah. Something about a healing community that heals together. I think that could be really a big needle mover.
I think also the community that believes that healing is possible, because I think there's so many communities where it's like you get so attached to your diagnosis. It becomes a part of your identity. And then if
Yes.
you try to change that part of your identity, you spin out. And so I think the thing that really kind of like separates our community from a lot of other communities is like these people feel like it's possible, that there's the labs give you hope because you've had so many symptoms for so long and you've been gaslit intentionally or unintentionally by your doctor for 15 years. And all of a sudden I run these 3 clinical labs and I'm like, oh, heavy metals are on board, mold is on board. You have no magnesium, no calcium, no sodium, no potassium. Like, this is why you feel the way that you feel. I feel that like our clients can experience some hope for the first time in a really long time.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the work that you do, and thank you for taking the time to share all this information with us. I'm going to put you on a little bit of a spot right now and
Let's
ask you a
go.
few fun questions.
Let's do it.
What's a wellness hack that you refuse to participate in?
I refuse to participate in cold plunging.
This has been one of the most popular answer
Really?
for podcast guests that I've had on, and I feel like there's a big thyroid connection there because a lot of us with hypothyroidism, we do not want to cold plunge. We do not need to cold
I
plunge.
will venture to say that most women
Yeah.
don't want a cold plunge. Chinese medicine has been around for, I don't know, 24 gazillion years.
Mhm.
And, if you look at like Chinese medicine, maybe that could be somebody that you can interview, somebody that
Okay.
I actually have a great person for you. But, like, being in the cold, it's just like not great. So yeah, cold plunging, I'd say cold plunging and intermittent fasting are like the 2 things.
Yes. Definitely cold plunges on my list. And intermittent fasting has been something that I feel like a lot of people try. And if they have adrenal dysfunction and thyroid issues, they can really, really crash with it. Where I'm
Ooh.
like, you can absolutely do it, but you need to do like 10 other things first. And when you're a breastfeeding mama, like, no.
No. There's a time and a place for autophagy and
Yeah.
its importance, but it's not where the majority of people need to start. So,
Absolutely. Most outlandish thing that you've ever done for your health?
coffee enema?
Oh yeah, coffee enema. That has it helped? I've heard mixed results from people that they really think it's great, and then people are like, "I perforated my colon."
Yeah. I needed to experience it. I don't like to like promote things that I don't that I personally haven't kind of experienced. Um it's not something that I do today. I think that there is a time and a place for it. I know with like cancer populations and some of those
Sure.
things. Um so I think maybe for me it's that I haven't like done a deep dive on it, so I don't have a high level of confidence, but I was like, "I'll try anything once."
Yeah. It's on my list of things of not to try. So it's a pretty short
I
list.
mean, it's not for everybody. Like I have a friend who is going through breast cancer treatment right now and she's doing them. So, I don't want like a bunch of like emails from like the coffee enema warriors being
Yeah,
like, no, it's great. I'm like, I think that there's a time and a place for lots of things.
absolutely.
Methylene blue is a big one right now. And it's like there's a time and a place for that. It can be disruptive for the wrong person, and it can be really helpful for the right person. So for me personally, I've done it. I just don't know enough about it to be like, okay, I'm going to do it like all the time. Plus, it's like messy and gross, and
For
I don't
for
know.
me, it's mainly the ick factor of it,
Yeah,
honestly.
there's a
Like
lot going on
I,
there.
I could see
Like,
how it would work well
I,
in
I I
theory.
deal with I probably have another like 5 years of poopy diapers, and I'm like 2 years in. So like I think I've just like reached my max of like poo stuff. So yeah.
I could fully appreciate that. If the supplement police came to your house and said, "We're going to confiscate all of your supplements, you're allowed to keep one."
It would be my custom mineral blend.
Fantastic. Where do you get that?
So there's an amazing woman. Her name is Lisa. She's the CEO and founder of a company called Vicon. And she really focuses on quality. She understands minerals and all the things. She's an incredible practitioner. She's kind of been one of my clinical advisors since I started running HTMA. And so she does these custom mineral blends, and it's not just minerals. There's, different sorts of bees, right? Some bees are more activating, some bees are less, are less stimulating. She's doing, you can do collagen, you can do iodine, you can do all of these kind of additional things, things to support liver, for example, like dandelion root and milk thistle and all these things. And so that's where we have a very strong relationship with that company. Um, and that would be like my thing where if that's the one thing I get to keep, then 'cause it's kind of cheating, right? Because it's like multiple things, but
Yeah.
it's like one product. So
Very smart. Smarter, not harder, right? I
smarter,
love
not
that.
harder. Yes.
What's your guilty pleasure that you have that maybe isn't like nutritionist approved, where people might see you out in the wild and they would be like, "Is that Maya Miller? Is she really
Yeah.
doing that?"
All right. I mean, I would say that uh I do chocolate chip cookies a lot. And not a lot. I'll do, what is it? Sweet Loren's is
Oh
the
yeah.
brand.
Gluten-free,
Gluten-free,
dairy-free,
dairy-free, it's
low
like all the
sugar.
things free, but usually if it's like gluten-free, dairy-free, it's also like fun-free.
Yeah.
There's like no fun in it as well, so I love Sweet Loren's. Um, at night, and this is more of like a pregnancy thing for me. I get very hungry at night where I feel like I had like a really great dinner full of like great macros, like fresh food, but I'm still hungry and I want something else. So I will have a glass of Kelowna milk as my favorite milk brand, and it's whole milk. It's this like farmer in Iowa. Great. I love it. I wish they had glass bottles. So if you're hearing this, but love the milk. And then I'll have 2 of the Sweet Loren's cookies. And so I think that would be kind of the like my guilty pleasure. I mean, I don't do gluten. I haven't had alcohol in years. Um, I don't miss any of that stuff, but I do like, I like me a chocolate chip cookie with a glass of milk at night.
That sounds like a perfect nightcap. That sounds really great, especially, like, being pregnant,
Yeah.
and that sounds perfect. Um, Maya, thank you so much for coming on the Thyroid Pharmacist Healing Conversations podcast. I've learned so much. This has been such a fun interview, such a fun conversation. Everybody at home, thank you so much for joining. Hopefully, this conversation will be a part of your healing journey. Until next time.